Yes, we are talking about security. Well, yes, you could say continue from where we left off yesterday, but we'll go a little further, not just about Kaduna, because these kind of clashes or attacks or killings, we've seen them in Plateau, you've seen them in Benue, you've seen them in Nassau, and different parts of the country, really. So we'll broaden the scope to try and understand why these things are happening, because, I mean, if you caught some of the headlines in the opening sequence, the IGP really did frown at it. They say they're now sending out some special forces to see how they can ensure that this curfew is strictly adhered to. Those were some of the concerns that respondents highlighted yesterday while they were on the program. So we'll have two gentlemen who will be joining us to shed some light on this matter in a moment.
And then another thing that you want to also reference is, well, on the one hand, is what I guess Colonel Stan Labo retired said yesterday about the responsibility that the state government needs to take. Of course, the state government has also come out to make some statements saying that these are age-long issues, but it's an act of banditry that are being quoted in religious and ethnic garbs. Then the question that you want to ask is, how do we carry people? Because you also remember when we engaged Mr. Femi Adesina on the president's SC media, and he also was saying that, look, there was that press release from the presidency that was advising people to bury their hatchets, to live in harmony and all of that. And of course, it's the same light in which the government of Kaduna State has been speaking. But the question that you want to ask is, how well are we carrying the people along? How well are we educating people on the need to bury the hatchet? We need to address the issues that are responsible for this thing. As Colonel Stan Labo said yesterday, these are age-long issues that ought to be addressed by the people themselves. Yes, but what kind of conversation are we having with the people?
Okay, well, let's get across to Rotimi Williams. He's actually a farmer, and then he's also the founder of Resolute 4.0. He will tell us about that. They've been looking into, the causative factors and some of these things. How do they happen? What's the pattern? I think these are some of the information that can help the authorities to see what they can do. Rotimi, good morning, and thank you for joining us today. So you are right there, out there in the field, and some of these attacks happen. So give us the background, because there's so much that is not out there in the media in terms of the character of some of these killings, these clashes, these attacks, as it were.
Okay, thank you very much. So I always like to use Basa local government in Plateau State as a reference point, because that's where we launched our pilot a year ago. And what we've noticed is attacks that may seem sporadic to the ordinary eye. When you actually log the data, then a lot more information is then revealed as to the pattern, the time of attack, for example, the frequency of attack, the type of attack, if it's an ambush or it's a full-on attack on a community, and then the sort of weapons used. Over a period, you begin to see the pattern, okay, that most of the attacks happen between 7 and 8 p.m., for example, in Basa local government. Ambush is laid between Hukia and Ancha. That's the deadliest route to be on at between 7 and 8 p.m. at night. And so information and data like this is what the security forces then require or then use to effectively locate their men, put their men in certain locations where they know there are hotspots, rather than just going based on, okay, an attack happened here yesterday, you put a few men. Of course, the attack may not happen again in that same location for another week or two. You see, so you need to have data and be able to analyze that data to effectively utilize the resources at your disposal. And I think that's the challenge that the security forces have. We don't have enough intelligence when it comes to data and analyzing that data to fully understand the dynamics of the conflict we are dealing with.
Well, Rotimi, I introduced you as a rice farmer and founder of Resolute 4.0, but the viewers are seeing something else. What's going on? What's with the camouflage?
Oh, no. So as part of, it's also with farming, actually. So I work with the Nigerian Army, through the Nigerian Army Farms and Ranches. We're in partnership, and we're producing rice here in Plateau State. And obviously, I don't want to stick out on the farm because, there's a lot of kidnapping going on around as well. So when I'm on the farm, I usually have my own camouflage. It's not the Nigerian Army. This is a NATO camouflage, but the people in the community and whoever wants to attack may not know that. So I just use it as a way of securing myself as well.
I just hope that, God forbid, that anyone who has any ulterior motive may not mistake you for one of them as well. But, there are a number of issues that you have mentioned about that data that you released. Is it safe to assume that, security agencies in your locality and perhaps around in other areas where we have such security threats, is it safe to assume that they have this information that you have? Otherwise, why do those attacks still happen?
So in the area where we launched, I do share information with the security agencies there, and I know that they utilize that information. We haven't, up until yesterday, we didn't have any attack in this area for, I think it's been about 7 to 8 weeks now. And what I noticed, and part of what data also shows you, is the pattern of attack. So usually when there are attacks in Bassa, there are fewer attacks in Kaduna, for example. And one thing people haven't asked themselves, I watched the viewer and your guest yesterday speak, and I waited for them to mention a very crucial point, which I guess they may not be aware of, is that the one thing, the three most volatile places in Plateau State are Bassa, Riam, and Bakinladi, right? And the one thing all three of them have in common is that all three of these places border Kaduna South. And they border places like Lere, Kaura, and the likes. Now, if you look at that and you now understand that you're dealing with bandits that are basically going back and forth between Plateau and Kaduna, that's the sort of thing that data shows you. And then based on that, you can now discuss. The two governors can sit down and discuss on how do they deal with this issue. The military can come in, the police can come in. It's not just an issue for the police alone.
So, given that all of these are happening, I'm wondering if these people, the security agency, are aware of all of these. I'm wondering why this also still has to happen. You just talked about the relationship, so to speak, between where you are and southern Kaduna, which is an area that's been in the news in recent time for these untoward activities. Now, if this information is known to security agencies, and according to the Kaduna State government, there is a military base there in southern Kaduna and 4 police squadrons, why then do we still have this unrest?
Okay, so what we do at Resolute 4.0, we only launch in Plateau State. We're not launching in Kaduna State yet. So they may not have the sort of data, or they may not be collecting the sort of data we collect and analyze that data the way we analyze it, you see. So they still have those issues. You can have 100 barracks in Kaduna, for example, but if you don't have information to work with, you're not going to be effective. And I think that's been what is lacking, is that lack of data to analyze and understand the issues we're dealing with. I'll give you an example. Last year, we saw a lot of attacks across Bassa, different areas of Bassa, but particularly one in Tafigana stood out. There were 3 attacks and 10 casualties, right? And immediately I looked at the data and I looked across. It didn't make any sense that there's 3 attacks, 10 people dead. There's something going on here. We need to look into it. I remember in January, I got a report from the community that they caught someone who confessed to be Boko Haram, and it was in that community. So obviously, it made sense that whoever is killing has some level of training. It's not just what we call bandit or headsmen or whatever you want to call it. There's something else at play, and data usually reveals this.
Now tell us, what is the span of this study that you've been doing? How long have you been doing it?
We launched June last year.
Okay, how many?
June 7th last year.
Okay, so how many local governments have you studied? Is this substantial? Can they extrapolate and use this as a typology of what could happen in some other localities where these attacks equally happen?
Okay, so we launched particularly in Bassa local government. Bassa local government has a population of, I think, 186,000, and then you have the sub regions or sub villages within that. So that's where we launched. We've dealt with over 209 panic alerts. So I think that's large enough sample size to be able to infer interpretation on the data we have. 209 alerts in the last 1 year, including yesterday afternoon. So that shows you enough. Carry on, please. You're going to have something.
How do you get these alerts?
So we give out smartphones to members of the community. Mostly those are security-minded or the vigilantes and whatnot in the community. And once they hear a gunshot or they see men gathering that they don't understand, they push a panic alert. And then we then place a call to them. And we act as a bridge between the volatile community and the security agency. You see, because most times that communication, that's where the issue starts.
Is there any percentage or any, has there been any false alerts, for instance?
No, there's never any false alert. So mostly what you get is people push a panic alert, and it's what we tell them is push if it's an imminent attack or ongoing attack, right? So even the imminent attacks that don't materialize or that don't come to fruition, usually give some form of information. Okay, they see 30 men gathering here. Why are they gathering there? You know, you ask questions and you're able to inform whatever security agency is available at that point to please look into it. And then from that point on, you begin to watch. So we haven't had a single false alert. You know, these people, it's their life at stake, so they're not going to play with it. They're not going to play with it. That's the beauty of this.
Now, you said earlier that you have reason to work with the military, and from what you have also said, once you get these panic alerts, you send the information to them. Is that where your partnership with the military stops, the security agency stop, or you go a little further?
No. So my partnership with the Nigerian Army is mainly to do with farming. They own the land. I farm rice on the land. So that's the relationship. However, with regards to security, I give them the information that I have available to me. If it's a panic alert that comes in, I make sure that I send it to them so that they can act on it. We don't only do that, even with the hospitals. Say, for example, in Bassa, there's a hospital in Miango. When someone is shot, it takes 1 hour for him to get from the village to the hospital. It takes the doctor, if he's at home, it takes him 20 minutes to get to the hospital. It takes him 1 hour, 20 minutes to prepare. So part of what we do as well is we inform the doctor the minute someone has been shot and we'll confirm that he's still alive, so that we can cut out that 40 minutes extra and see if we can save a life. That's sort of the thing we do with the data. That's just going an extra step in ensuring that lives are not lost. Because when lives are lost, it's harder to mediate for peace.
This talks about, it notifies you and the authorities eventually when you forward it to them, is when the attacks are happening. How do we get information as to why the attacks are happening?
So that's obviously that always is always followed by some analysis. Okay, so you ask questions to the root cause of this issue. What exactly is causing these attacks? And then you take that and you weigh it across with the data that you have. And then you like I wrote a white paper earlier on, I think it was late last year actually, on the conflict in Bassa, based on the information we had. You see, because it's also quite difficult. You know, you think that in the country where people are being killed, it'll be easier to roll out a system like this, but it's actually pretty difficult to roll out a system like this and get people interested in understanding what data can do, in understanding the issues they're being faced with. It's not that easy. So we've done this on our own. All the information we have, everything we've done, the phones we've given out, we did it on our own. You know, and that's part of the difficulty, Chamberlain. So rolling out to other states and being more efficient or more effective, it's a bit difficult if those states are not being receptive.
Well, you've talked about some very, very interesting things, which I hope the security agencies will also find very useful. But you said that people push the alerts. How does this happen? Is it is it an app or what?
Yeah, so it's basically a 4-key app on their phone, on their Android that we created. It's Map Your Farm, View Your Farm, Panic Alert function, and a marketplace. But the most crucial button there is the panic alert, and it's color coded, so they don't even have to read. They just push a red one. It drops. I get an alert by text, email as well, and my co-founder also gets the same. And then we push it then to the military, because the military is not on the platform, so we need to physically give the information and ensure that they act. Because once they push the alert, I will push out the information. We then call everyone in the community to ensure that there's action. And you'll be amazed how effective that is. From point to point, you can basically see how the movement is of the men going from their barracks to the point of the attack.
Okay, now looking at the frequency of attacks, as you plotted, we see timing between 6 a.m. to 7 a.m., and then there's 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. and then there's 4 p.m. to 1 p.m. Talk us through this.
Okay, so the timing of the attacks, mainly what we did there was we logged, every time they push a panic alert, when there's an attack ongoing, we logged the time the attack started. And then over the last year, we look at the frequency of which it happened at between, say, is it morning, is it afternoon, or is it evening? What particular time? And the most devastating time is between 7 and 8 p.m. in the evening. That's the worst time to be out. And especially in a particular local government, it's between Ancha and Huke. Between these two, you're most likely going to be ambushed and killed between 7 and 8 p.m. at night if you're there. That's what the data tells us.
And now this data...
So you can see
one will imagine that the authorities will have some of these information because they have been called at least several times in terms of when this is happening. But the thing is, there's still questions as to why they are not usually able to respond in good time and prevent killings when they know the frequency of attacks. Do you have any information on the background in terms of the challenges they could be facing?
I know access to some of these places is quite difficult. A lot of people assume that they're tied roads and you can get in there easily. It's quite difficult. And also trying to put men in these locations, trying to put 10, 20 men in this location for a period of 1 month and then there's no attack. The decisions I guess have to be made are beyond me. I mean, I'm not at that table, but I believe that with further analysis and just using data, their resources, they'll be able to use their resources better than they're using it at this point. I mean, that's not to say they're not using data, but I'm just saying the way we're doing it, I don't think they may be doing it that way because the way we collect that information is also quite unique. It's both qualitative and quantitative data. We speak to people. No matter how insignificant what they're saying is, we always pick the main points and we log it. You see? So those are the little things that make the difference.
Now, we also see this second chart, which has a lot of local governments now, Ancha, Huke, Kangoro, and several other local government areas. But the ones for Ancha, Huke, and Kangoro, why do they have such spike in those areas?
Those you see, that particular Huke, like the attack that happened yesterday was in Huke, for example. And I think it's also down to the density of the farming community there. If you look at the one that occurred yesterday, a 70-hectare farm was destroyed. It took 4,000 odd people to plow that land. That land was actually, that farm was actually put together to support the indigents of that community that lost their home due to conflict. And then they had it attacked yesterday, and then cows were seized and then given back. If a cow was killed, then there'll be a reprisal. So it just seems to be an issue with Uke and Ancha. And then whenever you predict that and you move men, the attack then moves elsewhere. That's the issue.
Is that to suggest that we kind of have an idea of why these attacks happen, what you just mentioned now?
Oh yeah, there's no confusion as to what is causing the attack. It's land resource. It's basically the farmers and the herders in this place. Basically, the issue in Basa is between two sister communities, right? The Irigwe and the Rokoba people, and then with the herders as well. So you have a three-way issue. That's the problem. So that's part of what I say. There has to be like a root cause analysis, community by community. You can't have a one-size-fits-all approach. The issue in Kaduna South may be very different from the issues in Basa local government. And even within Basa local government, the issues in Kagoro, Tafikana may be very different from the issues in Ancha. So every community needs to be looked at individually, analyzed and understood before you can actually act. I'm not sure a lot of that is happening at this point.
With all of these figures, Mr. Williams, is there any data to suggest that maybe there is some gender-based or age range-based data to suggest about all of this?
Oh no, so I mean, in the last 1 year, we also have the names. I mean, it's a bit sensitive. You have the names, the gender, and the community of everybody that's been killed. And I can tell you that they don't discriminate. Kids have been killed. I remember in January, three kids were killed while they were sleeping. They don't discriminate. Pregnant women have been killed on the farm, same as men have been killed on the farm. So they don't choose who they kill. It's who you see, you fire and then you leave.
And then this one, attacks by month. We see from June up until October. June has got 2. July has 11 and then the one for September has got 2. So those 2 months, does it have to do with the weather or what?
The farming season. It's the farming season. If you look at the attack that happened yesterday, this is July again. They went when the people have already planted and their soya had actually germinated and they grazed on it. So it's always with the dry, with the planting season. You see more attacks because more people are isolated from their communities and they're on the farm. So now what we have in Bassa is a lot of people don't go to the farm anymore. A lot of people don't go to their farms anymore. Some people that have smaller plots next to their homes have chosen to farm next to their homes, which is not good for food security in this country.
What do you think would be the impact of that, the spiral impact or spiral effect of that on food production? I mean, if people are not able to go to the farms, is that just an assumption?
No, it's not. If you look at it, about 80% of the food you have in the market that are produced in Nigeria are produced in the rural area. Now, it's these same people in the rural area that are being attacked. So the fewer people that are able to go to their farm only has a negative impact on prices of food and availability of food. That's the bigger issue. And then, that's without even talking about how it affects the livelihood of the rural farmers. These people, they plant, they harvest, they keep the food. When they need money, they sell some. Now they have nothing to sell. That cannot be good. And then when you now add COVID, the effects of COVID to that, and the fact that Nigeria can't actually afford a gap in food production, you can see how devastating this conflict is.
Pardon me, when you say it's a farming season, what stage,
yes,
for instance, in the farming season? Is it when the farming season is starting, the one for July, for instance, and then September? Is it when some of those are about to harvest?
So, Chamber notices that suggesting that when they're planting is when the crisis happens because they're planting, it's not so. It's because the people are isolated from their homes and they're easier targets on the farm. That's it. Now, when it comes to harvest, the way to harm a farmer is also to destroy his harvest. So they do it again at that point. And in between, there's sporadic attacks in the community. That's what we find. So, the reason for this conflict, why they kill, only the people that kill can answer that question, to be honest. It baffles me. It baffles me.
But all of this information that you send out, I mean, from your perspective, do you think that are they helping the authorities by the kind of results, perhaps, that you see, or response mechanisms and method and timing from the authorities, for instance?
Yeah, I believe it does. I believe it does, and I know that in terms of deploying resources, I know that this data has been utilized to be able to effectively deploy their resources. Sometimes as well, it just helps to confirm things that may happen. It's not, they may get information and doubt the information, and then it comes from us again, and then they realize that, okay, this is real. You see, that's the issue because, again, you get information from the community. Like the attack that happened yesterday, I got information that the weapon was stolen from the person that died, which wasn't actually the case. So I needed to confirm that information first before pushing it out to the authority and saying, look.
Right. What would you
Pardon?
advise other states who may be facing, killings or attacks on their farms? How can they utilize, or what part of this information can be utilized?
I think it's a lot of work because first you must understand why those killings are happening. The reason we launched in Bassa was because in April last year, 300 cattle were killed in Bassa, and we feared that there will be a reprisal. The reason we launched it was to see how we could reduce the effect of that reprisal, if possible, avoid a reprisal altogether. You see, and in another community, for example, that is similar to Bassa, that's similar issue to Bassa, they must understand why the fights are happening in order to understand how best to tackle it. The issues in Kaduna have gone on for way too long, and I don't understand why much hasn't been done. Like I've said, there's a relationship. I believe there's a relationship between the killings in Plateau State and the killings in Kaduna State. And for them to prove me wrong, they should actually do something about it. It's no coincidence that where the killings are happening, there's only one line dividing both states. And yet we haven't seen any form of collaboration or peace talks between Kaduna and Plateau State in terms of how do we deal with this issue together. If we attack from Kaduna side, obviously you push them into Plateau. If you attack from Plateau, you push them into Kaduna. It must be done simultaneously.
All right. Thank you very much indeed, Rotimi Williams, rice farmer and founder of Resolute 4.0. And stay safe.